Dozens of companies in the community that would love to talk to you about their companies and their roles. So we've got feature speakers and tech from all kinds of different roles, from software engineering to computer science to business to marketing. There's space for everyone, for you to follow your passions and decide what you want to do in a career right here in Newfoundland. So without further ado, I introduce Bronwyn Wolfrey and Jessica Hillier, both from Mysa, who is a fast-growing company with sales all over the world. So I'm going to kick it off to you, Bronwyn. I'm excited to hear what you folks have to say.
Amazing! We are excited to be here. I'm like wiggling. I can't sit still. I'm so excited. So yes, my name is Bronwyn, and I'll be starting us off. So this is me. My name is Bronwyn, and I am from Corner Brook, Newfoundland. I currently live in St. John's, and I work at Mysa. My job right now is a product manager, and we'll get into a little bit about what product managers are and what I do. And one question was, what was my favorite part of high school? And I was always just excited to be face and eyes into everything. So I loved extracurriculars. I would sign up for any club, cause, society. You had Model UN, chess club, and marathon, curling team, whatever was on the go, I was ready to be involved in. Because I like the novelty, I like learning, and that was always one of my favorite parts of high school. And with me, I have the very cool Jessica Hillier.
Hey, yeah, my name is Jessica Hillier. My pronouns are she, her, and I am from Halifax. I've lived here for about 15 years, I think, maybe a little less than that, actually. And I am currently a mobile app developer. I've been a developer in general for about a decade now. I have about that much experience. But right now I'm working with mobile apps, and I'll get more into that in a little bit. And I work at Mysa as well. My favorite part of high school was definitely art class. I loved taking stuff from my imagination and trying to make it real. And I thought my art teacher was super cool. And yeah, that is me. And we wanted to tell you a little bit about Mysa and what we do. So our company, it exists to help fight climate change. And the way we do that is we build smart thermostats for your homes. So the idea is we're helping homeowners and power companies manage their energy use so that they use less energy. And not only are they saving money, they are also saving the environment by using less energy. So for our company to make money, we sell our thermostats to those consumers. We have about 120 employees, which when I read that, I was shocked because I think I was hired when it was still below 100. And we have so many different roles in all sorts of different departments, including hardware, software, marketing, sales, product and finance, and culture and operations. We're also based out of St. John's right here. I'm currently at home, but we have an office in downtown St. John's. And we also have some remote members of our team as well. And our customers are from all over Canada and the USA currently.
Yep, I think I was maybe employee number 80 something back. I've been at Mysa for 2 years, and my job has been product management. So to sum up what I do in 3 words, I use the word users, problems, and no. And that sounds pretty strict. As you can tell, I'm a very strict person. I'm very serious all the time. But product management is pretty strict itself as a discipline in some ways. What you have to do a lot of the time is say no to a lot of things so that you can say yes to the right ones. And so what you'll find, especially in tech, is that there's so many ideas. There's so many ways to help people, to solve problems, to build just new cool things, that you'll be flooded with ideas all the time for new things, for enhancements on things, and my job is to make sure that what we do build next brings the most value to the users and solves the problem that we're designed to solve as a company. So one of my main jobs is to focus on the problem, focus on the user, and make sure they have a voice when everybody's trying to decide what to build next. I want to make sure that the customer is in the room in a way. So I'm kind of like the proxy of that. And like I said, saying no to the wrong things so you can say yes to the right things. So in the day-to-day of that, there is a lot of decision-making, organizing, asking questions, and lots of meetings. Do a lot of talking. You'll do user interviews. Product differs a little bit from company to company, which is very cool depending on your product. But essentially, these are always parts of product management. And in terms of what you'll need to be successful, I would actually say one of the skill sets that is crucial is empathy, which might sound a little bit surprising in the tech field and in a fairly technical role. But you have to understand, I wrote here, you have to understand users who aren't necessarily like you and represent them. And you also have to understand that there's going to be stakeholders and developers who come with their own priorities, agendas, or constraints that you have to consider as you move forward, because you can't just decide based on one thing. You have to do a lot of negotiation. And product is really cool because for the most part, like software developers don't work for a product manager. That's not the relationship. If I want something built by a software developer, I don't order them to. I ask them to, because it's a lateral relationship. It's not a hierarchical one. So that adds a lot of I guess communication and collaboration into the dynamic where we work, because you are the decision maker and you're responsible for a lot of elements, but you also have to make sure that you can influence and negotiate and get along with others, play nice. So I have 2 degrees from university. So I did a degree in an honors degree in biochemistry and nutrition, and I did a master's degree in public health, and I loved both of them, and I was very excited about both fields. I ended up in product. I can answer questions about that story, but it's actually more similar than you think, because it's both public health and product are about solving problems for large groups of people. So did I always want to be a PM? No, absolutely not. I did not know what a product manager was. I didn't know what they did. So I've come a long way in the past few years. I guess I've been a product manager for coming up on 5 years now for a couple companies. And no, I had no idea what that was. I actually interviewed to be a product manager on a dare. So, but it's been a while since then, and it's been a good journey. So to kind of recap what I've also already said to some extent is that if you're in product, you have a passion for problems. So a lot of people sum this up as building the right product and building the product right. So it's great to come with a solution, but if you have a solution that nobody wants, then maybe it's the wrong solution. And likewise, maybe you have the right idea, but you don't execute on it in a way that actually solves the initial problem you were thinking. So that's what product's all about. And you want to make sure your solution fits your need. And there's so many needs out there. It's one of my favorite things about the field. So working the same job at a different company looks very different. So currently I work at Mysa, and one of my favorite parts about Mysa is that we're managing energy at a population level through our collaboration with our partners, as well as through direct to consumer relationships. But previously, I've worked at a company that I would sum up as keeping dental patients safe. So I was working on very cool light spectrometry equipment, so hardware and software again, and basically making sure that what dentists were doing was safe and was going to last when they were working in people's mouths. And before product, the last role I was doing was helping edit vaccine guidelines with the CDC, which is very cool. So that I used as an example to show that it's really just about a passion for problem solving. What I do now and what I was trained to do has a lot more similarities than it does differences when you're looking at it through my lens anyway. So I do love any good problem. I love any good argument too. And I love learning what to build and also what not to build, like I said before, and how to improve on things. So that's product, which works very closely with app development, which is what Jess is going to talk about.
Yeah, so I am an app developer at Mysa, and I would say 3 words that describe my job is being creative, being collaborative, and puzzle solving. So let me sort of dive into each of those. So being creative, I know that coding isn't always seen as a creative tool, but I think it is quite a, you need to be creative to think about how you're going to solve certain problems. Being collaborative is also super important. You can't always solve the problems yourself. You need to talk with your coworkers and work on things together. And also puzzle solving. I love puzzles. I played Wordle every day for about a year. And not just like word puzzles, like I love math puzzles. I love jigsaw puzzles. And I think a lot of my day is just puzzle solving when it comes to code. You know, you find a bug and you're like, well, what is going on here? How do I fix it? So my day to day as a programmer is some meetings. I wouldn't say as much as a product manager. And I also create technical plans for new features. So we as developers are given ideas or like plans of what a product wants to do, and we need to say, okay, well, how can we take this plan and actually implement it and achieve it within the actual app? And also on top of that, we also track down and squash bugs because nothing's perfect the first time. I would even say nothing's perfect the 50th time. There's always going to be something there. So you have to look around and squash some bugs every once in a while as well. So some skills that are super important, problem solving, of course, not in the big people sense, but in the like small scale, what is going on sense. There's a little bit of logic there involved, of course. And organization. I love organization maybe a little too much. I always have my notebook with me, and I love writing things down. I think organization will get you anywhere, no matter what you choose to do. And the last one that's quite important as a developer is communication. As Bronwyn said, we work quite closely together, and while Bronwyn doesn't have the technical background that I do, she still needs to understand what I am saying so that she can make a proper decision on when something goes out or if we should continue with it. So having that ability or that skill to take a very technical thing and translate it so that it is understandable by someone who doesn't have the same background as me, super important. My education is a bachelor in computer engineering. Of course, that's not the only way to get there, and I will talk a little bit more about that later on. And did I always want to be a developer? Not at all, honestly. I was a very creative kid, and I thought I wanted to be a graphic designer. I wrote a lot of stories, so I thought I wanted to be an author at some point. I think someone told me I'd be a good therapist, which in hindsight, I don't know what they were thinking. But yeah, I wanted to be a therapist at some point, and somehow I landed up here. And actually, I think I'll describe that within the next slide.
I think you'd be a great therapist. You have a very calm way of thinking, like explaining.
Thank you. I wanted to describe a little bit about how I got here, my programming journey. When I was a teenager, I was a very online kid. I'm sure some of your kids, or some of you kids, you grew up with the internet, but with me, it was just coming around. Hopefully that doesn't make me sound too old. But my dad had a website, and he gave me a spot to be able to share my artwork and stories. And so I was learning how to make static web pages and show off my art and stories on there. And while making static websites isn't exactly programming, it's still like my first step towards like communicating with a computer. So then I went to MUN, and eventually I settled on electrical engineering. But when I got there, there was an introduction to programming course that I had to do, and something just clicked, and it just made sense to me. Being in that course was like you were talking with the computer, you wanted to do something. A bug was just a miscommunication, and you had to figure out where it was misunderstanding you. I loved it, so I ended up switching into computer engineering and went from there. Part-time, I was incredibly lucky to have a part-time job working with Sassy Tuna Studios, which I think actually was mentioned in a talk last week. And I've also worked at the MUN Engineering Outreach Center, Camouflage Software, Verifin, and now Mysa. So I've been a little bit of everywhere. And what I love about programming is it's used in all sorts of applications. So like no matter what you're interested in, there's almost always a way to introduce coding there. Oh yes, actually. So yeah, I think code it can be summed up in creativity and freedom as a career. I think it's very cool. You have a creative outlet, and you're able to see things that you imagine brought to life. And it's also everywhere. It's all around us, and it's in all industries. So no matter what you find interesting personally, whether that's environmental, financial, agricultural, or the entertainment industry, there's probably a tech company around there that you can work in. And also what I love is most developer jobs allow for independence, remote work, and freedom. So as you can see, I'm working from home. There's no one keeping eyes on me. There's no one like watching me to make sure that like I'm on the clock. Like as long as you are a self-initiative kind of person and responsible, like they leave you to do what you do best, which is work, and I appreciate that.
So, Jessica and I have always been very excited about thermostats. I feel like when I was about 4 years old, I was just all I wanted to do was play with a thermostat all the way up through high school. That is not even remotely true. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a thermostat example because we work for a smart thermostat company, but we have some other examples of work that we do as well, so that we don't just stick on one note. But basically, we'll show you kind of how Jessica and I work together. So if you want to think of it simply, I do a little bit more of the what, and Jessica does a little bit more of the how. And there's definitely a line there in terms of the division of how things work. So at Mysa, for example, we're going to take you through a feature that we recently added into the app. So one of the things that we added was the ability to have your thermostat on multiple schedules. And that means that, you know, if it's summer, you might want certain temperatures. If it's winter, you might want different ones. So why wouldn't you save both of those and change them out when you needed them? So what I would do in that situation is I'd review a bunch of user feedback on the fact that they're like, I hate that I have to erase what my thermostat does all the time just to put it in again next year. So after gathering this kind of feedback, talking to users, document some of your requirements. It looks a little bit like this. What you might do is what's called a PRD, like a product requirements document, things like this. And then you'd break down the work and build out the requirements into what are usually called user stories. So this kind of framing is just designed to keep the user in mind when we're solving problems. So I put a pretty simple one here that aligns with what we're going to show you today. So they're always written like this for the most part. It's as a, I need, so that. So as a user with multiple schedules, I need to be able to distinguish between my options so that I can apply the correct one. So this one's a small user story within a larger umbrella feature of this save schedules operation. And this chicken scratch down in the right-hand corner is an example of how I might start conceptualizing what the user needs in terms of like data layout function. This is called a low fidelity wireframe, and it's meant to look like it was drawn on the back of a napkin. The idea is that you don't invest too much time in like design, because I'm not a designer. I work with a brilliant designer, and he'll do the design. And I'll work with developers who will also tell me that my initial ideas might not work exactly as I thought they would. So you do kind of a quick sketch of what you generally want the user to achieve here. Keep the user story in mind. You bring that to who you're going to collaborate with, and then you negotiate back and forth. And then usually I end up with something that does not look like what I initially thought it might, but it does do what I or the user needs it to do, which is what I'll show you on the next page, and Jess will explain.
Yeah, so like Bronwyn said, a designer would take the design that, or the little note taking that Bronwyn had done and create a design out of it. And then I would take this, what's called a wireframe workflow, and turn it into the real thing. So as you can see on the right-hand side there, I have a little GIF that shows the whole thing animated and actually working. And so to get there, there's actually quite a bit that needs to be thought of and worked out when it comes to the code. So what animation needs to be used to go from screen to screen? So in the middle one there, we need to name the schedule. Well, where are we going to save that name in the back end? Well, where does that live? And then, of course, the last screen there showing you the list of saved schedules. Well, how do we get that list of saved schedules? Where is that saved? And how can we retrieve it and display it to the user at the right time? So there's a lot in between this that makes it look so simple from the outside, but on the inside there's quite a lot going on and a lot to think about. And so what I would end up doing is creating a technical design document to discuss how we're going to go about doing it, and then break up the work between me and my coworkers so that we can get it done a little bit faster. And then you end up with an end product like this, which can then be released to the user later on.
Yep, and I made a joke about like thermostat specifically, but I think based on this, you can kind of see that it's not really just a thermostat for what we're working on. We're working on what the user needs to achieve, how to best help them achieve that, and how to create it from front end, back end, all the things that are needed developmentally, and all the things that need to be delivered in order to help the company with its goals and help the user with theirs.
Yeah, exactly. And I also wanted to highlight, I'm only one part of the story, so I am working on the app, but there's a lot more different types of developers at Mysa. So the middle one sort of represents the backend or cloud developers. So there are people who work with what's called Amazon Web Services or AWS to manipulate data in the background. And this is all the code where if you press that down arrow and want to change your temperature to be lower, there's all this code that runs that you just never see and never think about. And they help you never have to think about it, basically. But also code within the thermostat itself. So not only just code, but also the hardware. Because when you think about it, hardware itself is code in its own way, an electronic code. So there's all sorts of hardware developers, and then firmware, which is code that runs on the thermostat as well. There are developers for that here at Mysa as well. So there's tons of collaboration amongst like tons of different areas of development.
Yep, and working at a hardware, software, firmware company is really interesting. A lot of companies now are specifically software or specifically one sort of product, but that leads us into another example that we brought that might resonate slightly differently than thermostats. It is a silly example of how our jobs work that we made up today to share. So to give you another idea of how product and software work outside of the view that we just gave you into what we do at work every day. So here is my product example. So you start, like I said before, with a problem. So when I drive across Newfoundland with my dog, I need to stop and let the dog out. That's the user problem. Somebody's come to you and they're like, this is an issue for me. And you're like, I see you have a problem. I can solve this. I can help you with this. I'm going to make a solution. And so this is the dog that needs to be let out. I think I want to call him Cheddar because of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, so we'll call him Cheddar. And so one of the things that people instinctively do when they hear a problem in general is they start coming up with solutions for what's called the market, which are the users of your potential solution, and they start coming up with solutions right away. So you could do that with this problem. You could say, okay, I'm assuming like you need to let your dog out because the dog needs to, relieve itself. So how could we do this? We could do something really wild and hardware focused. We could put like a car beacon on anybody's car and one in every dog park so that when you get close to a dog park, it beeps and then you know that you could let your dog out there. And that could be how we solve it, which is really intense as a solution to let your dog out. And it could cost like $1 million, let's say. And then you might go with a software focused approach where you're like, oh, I'm going to design a website or an app and I'm going to inventory, like gather all the data for all the potential dog park stops across the island. And I'm going to make that into a solution that I provide. And it's going to be a do it myself kind of thing. It's going to cost me like $500 of my own time and resources because I have the setup and the ability to do that. So you could do that. Or you could also think about it further and be like, okay, so why did your dog need a technical solution to this problem? Like, couldn't he just get out of the car when you get out of the car to get gas and like relieve himself? Do dogs really need a fancy place to stop the car and let them out? And the interesting thing about this example, and as silly as it is, I think it does draw great parallels to what happens a lot of the time in product management, is that we kind of just assume that this person, when they're driving across the island with their dog, they're like, oh, I need to stop and let the dog out. They're like, oh, it's because the dog has to go to the washroom, just like people have to go to the washroom. But if we talk to the customer further, or like the potential customer, we might not be understanding their problem. We might be jumping the gun. So like, why do you need to stop let the dog out? Instead of answering that question for the user, this is when you dig in and you start asking more questions about what the user's goals actually are. And you might learn more reasons than you thought. So the dog does need to relieve himself. That's a thing that you assumed and you got right. But there are other things that you may have missed, which is that my dog needs exercise, or he starts chewing the car seats. He gets like so agitated for sitting so long. He just can't handle it. Or I need exercise. My legs get stiff when I'm driving. I need to get out of the car and walk around. So I need to stop and let the dog out. And usually we go for a walk every day. And when we drive across the island, we don't have time. Or when I sit too long without, moving, I get sleepy. And it's just not working for my drive across the island, which has nothing to do with the dog, but that's not the way the problem was framed to you at first. So the real moral of this example is that the user's top priority is actually exercise, really. You might find when you talk to them after a while, and this might not be true for every user, which makes the problem even more interesting, but we assumed that they wanted to solve this for one reason. There are actually several reasons they want to solve it, and of those several reasons, the most important one isn't the one you might have initially thought. And we're going to come back to this silly example later, because if you're designing a solution to this problem, it might look very different than the initial problem that you were assuming. And I hope it doesn't end up with $1 million hardware beacon solution. That's probably unnecessary, but it is sometimes where the mind goes. So that's kind of why product management exists, so that we don't run away with our ideas before we properly understand the problem, and we don't build things without recognizing which one has the best return on our investment. Because in this particular case, for the initial problem, you don't need to invest anything almost to solve the initial problem you thought you were solving. But maybe there is a high value solution to your new problem that you've gotten to. And that's how product works. And Jess will tell you how software development works, or at least some software development examples that she's come up with.
how software development works more than I just love having fun with programming, and I really wanted to share some fun things that I've done over my time. So what I love about software development and coding is like it can be used as a medium to just like express yourself and do fun things. I've done quite a few fun things on my own outside of work. One is a Twitter poetry bot that was supposed to be somewhat sad, but cute in some way. And I've also worked with a Now robot with the MUN Outreach Center, so being able to work with that and learn how it works and how that it can be used in the summer schools that you may or may not have attended is very cool. You can make chat bots, and I added this because I love being able to show that some things don't always work the way you expect them to. I wanted the chatbot to be able to say my name through Facebook, and something just did not work. And that is okay, honestly. What I love about programming is sometimes it's more funny to fail with like small things like this, right? So being able to make fun of your failures is always a good way to go about it as well. And the last one is a Discord bot. I don't know if any of you use Discord, but I know that bots are quite fun and they can be used all over the place. This is actually from my sister's server. Her friends, for some reason, were making this little mouse change the calendar date, but they were doing it manually. So I made a little bot for them so that they can call the calendar mouse and it would auto-generate a date for them. So you don't need to think about programming all the time in the big business sense. I think it also can be used to express yourself and have fun and think about the small problems in your life. Or not even maybe problems, just fun things that would be cool to have. And maybe programming is a way that you can achieve that as well. And the next thing we wanted to talk about was diversity in tech and how we can make tech more diverse. I think it's incredibly important. I know that in my career, there have been times where I'm the only woman in the room, but it has gotten a lot better in the past few years as well. And being able to see how your unique experiences sort of affect a decision, even when you think it's just the most mundane thing, to someone else who maybe doesn't have that experience at all, it's massive. And tech is the future. Whether we like it or not, it's the future, and we have so much of it in our lives. I mean, even presenting to you now, we're on Zoom, or sorry, we're on Google, presenting the PowerPoint, and I'm talking to you through a camera. There's so much here that is all around us in our everyday lives, and we should make sure that we build it for as many needs as possible. And we can't do that unless we have as many people with as many different backgrounds and ideas as possible to get there.
Yeah, and that's part of the strength of Mysa, as well as one of the themes of our presentation today. We didn't just stick to one example of tech because we want people to know that it's not always a linear journey. So from the product side, I mentioned before, product managers exist to represent user needs and interests, and we make decisions on what can be built based on return on investment and value, and solving user problems. But diversity in tech, like Jess said, and like we know, diversity in general brings the opportunity to find problems that can go overlooked, make stronger teams, create new solutions and better solutions. Diversity brings strength, I think, has been a theme, whether you're a biologist or a technologist. And this example might seem a little out of left field, but so my question would be, why would a marine biologist, I guess, marine biologist work with a hairstylist? And I'm going to actually put Jess on the spot. Do you know how these two are related at all? You're not supposed to know, so.
No, I have no idea, Bronwyn. How are marine biologists, and why would a marine biologist work with a hairstylist?
So this is one of my favorite examples of diversity in tech, which is the idea that a hairstylist was the one who came up with the idea for hair mats that absorb oil from oil spills. So in marine environments, we know that like sometimes ships or oil companies might have spills. And in this situation, one of the new kinds of, it's, I guess, a product or a technology, depending on how you want to view it, is using waste from hair salons and pet shops. People actually weave these mats, and because hair naturally absorbs oil, they're used to clean up oil spills. But the reason I think this is a good diversity example is because I don't think that typically you might picture the oil company hiring a hairstylist on staff, or typically you'd even picture a marine biologist or like a conservation scientist hiring a hairstylist as somebody who would have a solution to their problem. But this is the beauty of different points of view, is because there was a hairstylist who saw that, oh, I know that hair absorbs oil. I know that oil needs to be absorbed, and came up with a really creative, super solution to this problem. And I don't like even. I think it just goes to show that even if you're an expert in your field, it means that you're an expert in the things that are known in your field sometimes. But if somebody comes in with a different perspective or a different lens or a different point of view, they can introduce that new solution or that new creative way of matching two things together that wouldn't have been matched before. So that's one of my favorite examples of how hairstylists and marine biologists overlap when for the good of all the penguins, anyway, and the rest of us. So to sum up what we've talked about for Jess's role and my role, I have a slide on PM skills and resources. Jess has one on software. So my recommendations actually, if you're interested in product or product management specifically, the first thing I wrote was team sports, and it sounds really funny now that you might see it on the slide, but working at a tech company in this kind of role is basically like a giant group project. It's a big sport. It's everybody is playing a different position, and we all have to work together to achieve a goal. So I think if you're in school right now and you're trying to build some skills in terms of just working together with others, team sports or team activities are a great way to just, it doesn't sound like, oh, that's how I'm going to, get somewhere in my career, but it actually gives you a lot of great transferable skills that are valuable in a workplace setting that get picked up on when you're interviewing or when you're, looking for a new job at a networking event or something like that. It's good to get along with others and to be able to work together to achieve a common goal. The other thing that I've studied a lot of is data, statistics, and analytics. I come from a science background, and that has only helped me in product because a lot of what we do, I described as gathering user feedback. There's a number of ways to do this. Sometimes you do it by talking to people, and sometimes you do it with giant databases full of information, or by watching trends that unfold in different places, whether it's online or in data that's been gathered or things like that. So being analytical and critical and having the ability to navigate data and statistics is a superpower. Avenues for entry. So the thing about product management, and the reason I put this little diagram in, is because it kind of sits in the middle of customer, technology, and business. And that's what I love about it. There's very rounded position to be in. You have to know a little bit about everything, and you have to know how to work with every team. I kind of entered it through the customer side more than anything. I had roles in, kind of technology and customer side, because some of my other roles before I was in product were QA and data integrity and customer intelligence and customer success roles. So I did some of those before I ended up in product, and they really helped me move forward. But what happened was, when I did actually end up interviewing for the product position that I initially took to get into product, I wasn't trained in product management specifically. So my company sent me to Boston to train with a group called the 280 Group. So they're a product management body that exists, and they have several courses. There's no degree per se that I could find in product management right now, so it's not quite like computer science or engineering, although those are avenues towards product management if you go from the technology side. But yeah, I did my training with 280 Group, and then I got my AIPMM certification, which is like an internationally recognized stamp. But like I said before, my 2 degrees that I did before in science really helped me and really continue to help me in terms of that data and analytics, and also in terms of looking at populations at a level that is helpful for product decision making. And global competencies, I wrote some at the bottom in terms of collaboration, yes. Creativity, also yes. Like that oil mat example, I think a little bit of creativity goes a long way when you're solving a problem. Communication is really big. You have to make sure that everybody is on the same page and then some, because designs don't just move in one direction for a solution. Usually they go back and forth a lot. So you have to make sure you have the latest, and everyone else does too. And critical thinking, of course, super helpful. But yeah, depending on what product you work on, product is really cool. Similar to what Jess said, different products require different kinds of product managers. So if you're working solely on a hardware product, if you're designing, I don't know, Starbucks cups versus if you're building an app that helps, you know, organize your grocery list, you need to know a couple different things from the product side before you're entering into that arena.
I just need to go back to the oil mat example because I'm still not over it, you know. I love that. I'm keeping that in mind. And I'm just going to tell everyone I know that now. When it comes to if you want to be a developer, whether that's app developer or any other type, there's all sorts of resources now, and I think they're growing by the day, really. The ones that come to mind for me are, of course, one, computer engineering or computer science, the Get Coding Bootcamp, or even if you just want to learn on your own, there's Udemy, YouTube, all sorts of free resources as well. That being said, I cannot recommend any of these over the other. I think it all comes down to what you're looking for and your unique circumstances. That being said, I kind of wanted to let people know, if you are looking to learn a little bit of coding on your own, maybe it's just a summer project, you can use a tutorial or something just to get started and to have something to work from, and you can expand on it after. For example, this is actually a GIF of a Flappy Bird tutorial that I went through a few months ago, and I decided to make it my own by replacing the images of Flappy Bird and the pipes and stuff with some coral and an octopus, and the game is Floppy Octy, and it's not very good right there. I didn't have a better recording at the time of making this presentation, but it's all about having fun and making your own thing, and it's always easier to start from a template and to build into something of your own rather than staring at a blank page and being like, well, what do I do now? So definitely keep that in mind if you're interested in starting some programming projects. And the last little piece of advice I'd like to leave with you guys is start small and don't be afraid of failure. I've shared a lot of fun, silly things that I've done, and some of them don't always work out the way I planned. And it's always great to just have fun with it. Don't feel like you're a failure because you didn't get it right the first time. Or even the third time. You just keep working at it, and you'll get it eventually. The GIF itself is from there's an event in Japan called HibaCon, where it is just about making the baddest robots you can. And so this one just shakes powdered soup. I'm pretty sure the armadillo just goes straight. It can't turn or anything. And they battle it out. And the whole point is just to have fun making bad robots and just enjoy it. So have fun with failure, and that's what I'd like to leave you with.
And then you're always surprised at how many people do want a robot that just shakes powdered soup. I don't know how big that market is, but we do have one final slide, and it is our prompt for an exercise. If you guys would like to try a little challenge, this comes back to Cheddar the dog who's in the car. So if the problem actually exists exactly the way that we interview this imaginary customer, and they're very much interested in their own activity and the activity of their dog because the dog chews the seats and they just get really restless. Like, everybody needs exercise. Exercise is healthy. That's one of their goals. But they're in the car. Maybe they drive from Cornerbrook to St. John's. It takes 7 to 8 hours. How might you solve that problem? Like, how might you use technology to help them solve that problem is the question. And of the solutions that you might come up with, which one has the best ROI, so the return on investment. And also, one of the questions we put here that Jess and I were discussing was, what challenges would you face? Because a lot of times what happens is people have the best intention. They're like, oh, you created me an app to to help me map all the dog parks or all the parks on the island on my drive across, and now I can stop at any of them and walk my dog. But despite that, I don't. Why don't I? Like, what kind of challenges are going to face this solution, even if you know the problem's real, you know the user says they want the solution, but maybe you build it and they don't actually adopt it or engage with it the way you'd hoped. And that happens a lot in technology, and you have to kind of anticipate what your challenges might be, what the hurdles will be for the user. And finally, what kind of value is there in solving this problem? So let's say you do the perfect solution, you solve the problem. How many people have that problem, and how much are they willing to put forward to, invest in a solution? Because that gets into the more business side of it. It is relevant. I think if you're building BattleBots and the event is about them being a one-directional armadillo or a powdered soup shaking robot, then you're okay. It doesn't matter. But if you work for a company, then usually they want to know, if you come up with a new idea, a new product, or new solution, where's the value in solving it? What kind of value exists there, and what does the future of that look like? So that concludes Jess and my speaking part. I hope we stayed pretty close on time.
Thank you so much, guys. That was wonderful. I have lots to think about and to look at things in a different way. If anyone has any questions, please post them in the chat or unmute and speak up and ask away. Or Katrina can post the link to the Google form if you have questions later on, or if you tune into any of the recorded other presentations. So I guess we'll just wait a few minutes for that to populate a little bit. But I have a question, Bronwyn, maybe about your history and how you went from nutrition into product management. That sounds like an amazing journey.
Do you want me to describe the general product, or do you want to hear anything in particular?
I'm fascinated that the paths are not always clear cut, that just because you don't know what to do in high school or even university, that's okay. That we find our path eventually, and even change sectors or industries along the way.
Yep. So one of the cool things I've always felt in general is, if you don't know exactly what you want to be or what you want to do in the future, that kind of opens you up to be anything or do anything. And I've always had that philosophy. Some people know exactly what they want to be, and that's great. I used to envy that, but then I realized that I've had a lot of different jobs as a result of it, and a lot of different experiences, and that has always worked so far in my favor. So I studied biochemistry. I love biochemistry. Still love it. It was very, very interesting and exciting. When I was doing my thesis, I did some research hands-on, and I realized that maybe I didn't want to go all the way forward with doing a research path there. So then I discovered public health, which is related but slightly different. And when I did that, I loved it. I worked for, like I said, CDC with Eastern Health for a little while, but there weren't jobs hiring in my sector at the time. There were budget cuts when I went through, and the program was excellent and the placements were excellent, but just wasn't an opportunity there. So then I had a friend who was signing up for a program called Venture for Canada. I should have mentioned them in my slides, actually. So Venture for Canada takes recent graduates who need experience. So you're educated, you come out of school, and you need a job, and you lack experience. A lot of startups, so small companies, small tech companies in particular, are working hard to find talent. They're looking for employees that are educated, and oftentimes there's an opportunity there in terms of matching recent graduates who need experience with startups and talent. I said, no way, that's not for me. That's for business people. I'm not a business person. I don't know if that's a real fit. And then I was challenged to apply. I applied. I got into the program, did my fellowship, ended up at some startups in Nova Scotia, which was really interesting. Worked my way through roles. I started out with data and then moved through a couple different customer roles, and then ended up in product because they were looking for a product manager at this startup and they couldn't hire one for 3 months. And then my friend said, you should go for that. And I said, I don't know if I can. And I tried it, and then I learned it, and then I did it. And that's how that worked. And I really love product. Product is really fun. It's a great fit, and it changes so much. I think it can also, like, Jacqueline works at Polyunity, which is in the health sector, so I'm sure like there's a lot of overlap there. Whatever your background is, to usually find it full circle sometimes.
I think it really fits you as well.
Sorry, Jessica, go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say I think it really fits you as well, Bronwyn, because you're very passionate about it, and you always have been. You know.
Awesome.
Yeah,
Any
the
final
passion for
words
your
of
work
us,
shines.
Katrina?
The passion for your work shines through in the way that you speak about what you do, but also in your face. It's very visible that you're very passionate about what you do. And we really want to thank you for sharing with us today, and especially for highlighting that diversity in skills that brings the strength that businesses and companies need, and the value of the different perspectives and educational backgrounds that help provide solutions. I really want to thank you for that, and for the great stories, and for the cute little images of the bots and the dogs, and all that creativity came shining through as well. It was a real pleasure to have you with us today, and we're going to share the